Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Wajid Ali. I'm live from Toronto, Canada. Uh, Thank you for tuning in wherever you are in the world. And it will be a really exciting session today since we will be touching on various topics, various points related to leadership and how we can become effective leaders in our capacity, no matter what our role or position is within an organization. I have my co host and my expert on leadership, Rob Kamranpur. So will welcome him onto the stage and we will allow him to give us his introduction real quick, and then we will jump into the formal podcast. So, welcome, Rob. Hey, Rob, can you hear
Awesome. Good
me?
afternoon, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. How's it going? And thank you for having me again. And excited to be a part of this and looking forward to our discussion today. I think we've got some questions, so we can kind of dive right in. Again,
That's
my
right.
name is Rob Cameronpour, and I'm the founder of Arcade Leadership. And I'm excited to answer your guys' questions today. And if you have any other questions, please send it in, and Waja and I will have a look at it and get back to everybody accordingly.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. Yes, you're right. We have some questions. So we will start with addressing those questions first that came in from some of our community members. And the question is basically let me rephrase it. So the question says that if we have different team members, which typically is a case if you're in a leadership role, you have different team members, and we know that, you know, almost everybody is different. So no, there's very less likelihood that everybody has the same personality. So most of the team members have different personality. Then, as a leader, how do you effectively handle different personalities or different personas when it comes to the workplace?
Yeah, and that's great. Again, we all work in environments where we work with teams that are different. Like you said, different personalities, different attitudes, different knowledge and experiences that they bring forward. So the best way to deal with this situation is understanding and learning about your team and who's who. Learning about your team members and their strengths, capabilities, backgrounds. It's very important to know your team. That's the first and foremost. And again, in these kind of situations, as a leader, I think the best style of leading, members who are different is situational leadership, which you and I have spoken about before. And it's really, you have different situations, different people, and you're utilizing the style of situational leadership to deal with the various situations as they come. But I think again, it's important to know your team, understand your team, having those expectations where you set those expectations for your team, and they set expectations of you, and that's how you build that relationship, and you get to know their style as you move on. And just wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on this, and how have you kind of um, seen this play out in your career?
Yeah, Rob, as you said, so you kind of touched on very important points, and the way I would similarly the way I would handle it is to understand the situation, call it situational leadership, and use that strategy. Beside that, I mean, as you said, we are all humans, and every human has different backgrounds, different, you know, call it different brought ups, and then that kind of molds into the personality. So having clear one-on-one communication with your team members would help
Yes.
you understand the personality of that person, and then perhaps having different one-on-one sessions with each individual would help you address if they have any concerns or if they have any issues that you may not know if you're talking to them in a group setting. So I would encourage those leaders who are having team members with different personas. It's always good to have a team group meeting setups. That's also important, but you have to take time and have one-on-one sessions with each members individually as well, just so that you understand, and maybe some people are not comfortable enough to share their thoughts or their feedback in a group setting. So for those people, it's always encouraged to have one-on-one sessions. So that's how I look at it, Rob.
Yeah. Again, excellent. Those are some great points, and I think you touch upon a very important point. Is the one-on-one meetings is, again, I've emphasized this enough in a lot of areas and contents that I share. Don't make it just an end of the year one-on-one session. Have these regular one-on-ones, even if it's informal. It's those informal sessions where you get to really learn about people. And again, we talked about, I think last time, about the open door policy. The new open door policy is you get out and you visit your teams and have those non-formal conversations. That's when you connect with people. That's where you get to learn what their style is like. That's where you actually get to hear them out. Very important to have those kind of conversations and communications.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you're right. We did talk about it in our previous podcasts. And I think you in your individual efforts that you're doing, you're running your own podcast, and you have alluded to these times and times again. Having, I guess, multiple touch points, as you said, with the team members is important, is a key, I guess, to have a successful team. And if you're not doing it frequently enough, then definitely you have problems in your process. So what I would encourage whoever is watching it, take some good notes and make sure that no matter if you're not a leader, but even if you're a team member, you can go out to your leader, to your manager, to your boss, whoever that person is, and set up one-on-one with that person individually. So what I'm trying to say here, Rob, it's a two-way communication. For example, if your leader seems to be busy or whatever, and they're not able to have it in your calendars, I guess you can take initiatives. And just by taking 100%. An initiative, you are showing some leadership skills, right? So that is also a plus point. And maybe by doing so, eventually, you'll land into a leadership role.
Absolutely. Again, that's a great point. It's very important for you, as a team member to take initiative. And again, you are demonstrating that leadership trait. And I think the other part of the question, Wajid, that our viewer had as well, and I want to run this by you, is what strategies would you use to effectively collaborate with leaders who have contrasting leadership styles? So again, you're a manager or a leader, and you're collaborating with your equals or people
Right.
above you. What strategies are you using to effectively collaborate with them when they have contrasting leadership styles?
Yeah, I guess it goes along the same way that we just described earlier. But since now you're dealing with your peers, who are kind of equal in your similar, maybe not the same role, but kind of a similar responsibilities or similar cadre, if you will. And my approach is I reach out to them on a personal level. So I try to connect with them personally. I guess empathy is the best way of connecting emotionally and maybe personally with those leaders, and using like the strategy of being an empathetic leader, understand what challenges, what problems those leaders are facing. So everybody in a leadership role, they have some challenges going on call it day-to-day basis. And those challenges could be sometimes could potentially represent themselves as an obstacles for you while you're dealing with those call them team members, right, or leaders. And what I would encourage, if you are in that situation and you are dealing with those different leadership styles, just reach out to them, have one-on-one sessions with them, understand what problems they are going through, and just be open with them with your expectations. So if I'm expecting anything from you, Rob, and if I feel like you're not delivering or you're not up to that expectations, I should come to you and I should talk to you openly, and let's have a mature and an adult conversation, that, if you will. So that's how I will handle it. I'm very open. I like open communication. And I want to be transparent myself, and I expect the same from my peer. And if there are challenges, then I guess that's how I will handle it. But what are your thoughts on this role?
Yeah, and that's great. Again, I think a lot of it stems back to the first part of our conversation with with the same as a team. Again, just because you're dealing with a different level or the same level of people, remember, again, you're dealing with people that are in leadership roles now, but they have different styles than you. So again, it's getting to know them, getting to know their styles, communicating with them, interacting with them on the leadership level as well. It's about compromising. You have to compromise with them because you are different than them. So there's times where you do have to compromise with them, and like you said, I think one of the best things you said is ask them how you can help them. Right? You're gonna have certain strengths that they might not, and they might have some strengths that you might not. So, and one of the other areas I think it's important is help teach each other. If you've got a specific style, maybe you can teach them about your style, and vice versa. You should also listen to them and what they have to offer, and that's where you also learn situational leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was talking to somebody, I guess yesterday, on similar challenges, and what I would recommend, Rob, and I feel like it goes through, it goes with that coaching concept, right? So all of us being human, I mean, you go through training. Let's say you go through a training or a coaching session, but then if you don't practice it, right? If you don't practice it enough, you cannot deliver on what was taught to you and in that coaching session. So what I'm trying to tell here to the audience is that, hey, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're listening to mentors that you may have in your own organizations, you may have in, no matter what your role is, yes, it's important to listen. It's important to take coaching, and it's important to take mentorship. But at the same time, it's essentially important and equally important that the practicing of what you have heard and learned. And if you don't practice it, then you cannot be an effective player, no matter what your role is, right? And
Absolutely.
I feel like that piece. Yeah, I feel like that piece is missing most of the time. People go for coaching, people go for mentorship, which is important, and I absolutely encourage everybody to go for it. But then if you don't practice it, if you don't actually apply it, so what's the value that you're bringing back to yourself, right?
Nothing. And I, that goes hand in hand with the training that I see, and I talk about this, I've talked about this with several people. When you have leadership training or any kind of training for that matter, and you've got like a 2-day, 3-day training, a 1-day training, you go through the training, you don't use it, you don't apply it, you don't take action, you don't execute things that you've learned, it's gone.
Yeah,
right?
It's gone.
And I think it becomes a huge waste. It's a huge waste of money that people go through. And I think when you go through certain training, you got to keep people accountable to, that to see if they're applying what they've learned, and you got to
Right.
kind of mentor and coach them through that to
Right.
ensure that they've learned from it and they keep applying it throughout.
Yeah, and Rob, you're making a great point here. So if you are in an HR role and one of your mandate is that you have to train people, you have to train leaders to make them effective leaders, right? So to your point, you offer them training, you facilitate trainings for them, but then if they're not accountable for the delivery piece of it, then to your point, you're absolutely not just wasting like the money, but you're wasting, I guess, the time too, right? This time is also equally important as
Yeah.
it goes. Yeah.
That's
So
right.
I think here are
And
some
we know time is
recommendations for. Yeah, that's right. So I guess here are some recommendations that maybe if any HR person is watching it, it's something that we encourage to train the staff. We encourage to train people on the coaching of the leaderships and different styles of leaderships. But then I guess your role as an HR person, or if you're a leader or whatever, make sure that there is something that's being kind of tracked. So you call it accountability, or maybe use a different term, but how you track that improvement, right? Since you're doing it, Rob, I have a question.
Here's the
Yeah,
issue.
go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Here's an issue where I see with organizations, and going again, just elaborating on what you're saying. You have this training, you have this leadership training that you're training your new leaders to go through. The biggest problem that I see with a lot of organizations is who is following up to see how effective that training has been, and again, what people have learned through and they're applying. Now it's your leader or your manager that's supposed to be tracking and following and coaching you and ensuring that you do this. But the problem is they're bombarded with so many meetings, and their agenda is so full.
Right.
Where's the time for them to do this? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you look after your people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. That's one of the challenges that we are facing in this corporate world environment, where leaders are mandated to train their team members, which they do most of the time. So they facilitate the training, or they hire coaches and trainers and mentors for their team members. But then, since to your point, they are so much occupied in so many other activities on day-to-day basis, they can't track it. So I guess going back to our initial comment of one-on-one meetings and having frequent one-on-one meetings is the key. I guess that's where you can touch base with your team members and see what they're doing and how they're doing, right?
Just like communication, you said, is bi-directional, so is accountability. Accountability goes two ways. Your manager is accountable for you, and you are also accountable for your work to your manager. So just to touch up a little bit more on this point, and the model I've created with the Arcade Leadership is looking at this gap. The training I would provide organizations is I would come in, do your training, train your leaders 1 day, 2 day, whatever that criteria is. I say,
Right.
okay, I conduct this training for you. However, here's where my model differentiates from the rest of the crowd. I will actually coach your staff for an entire year because I know your manager is busy. So I'll take that onus in coaching you. So now you have a baseline that you see where this, this individual leader was, and you can see the performance improvement over a year, and you track that, right? And you do that with the coaching throughout, and keeping them accountable for all the action items and what they've learned. Because when you kind of stand beside them and they're applying it, they're learning as they're progressing. And then you can say, okay, you're ready. You hand them off, but still, you still have to have those touch points as their manager to them. That's your accountability. You're managing people. And if you don't have to manage your people, those are different. Like, you got bigger problems on your hand, right? So I think it's
absolutely.
very, very critical. And I think that's a huge gap, right? And you've seen it. And, you're working and you've worked in various organizations.
Right.
How many one-on-ones do you have or did you have with your managers?
Yeah, it's true. It's a challenge, right? And I totally agree with what you just said. It should be. I wouldn't say it is. I would say the word it should be a bi-directional thing between a team member
Yes.
and a manager or a leader. So if your leader, for whatever reason, is not able to connect with you frequently for one-on-one, it's your job as a team member to connect. It's for you. It's for your growth. If you want to grow,
Yes.
if you want to become something that you want to become, then you have to take initiative. You don't need to leave it to anybody else. It's your job. And if you're not doing it, no one else is going to do it for you. So it all comes down
That's
to
right.
that mindset. All comes down to the mindset, right? It all comes down to how much you want to invest in yourself. This is an investment, right? This
Yeah,
is what you're investing into
it
yourself.
is. Not only
So I
yourself,
would,
you're investing
yeah,
into your people, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And to answer your question about the frequency that I have seen on about one-on-one meetings, it only comes down, in most of the cases, it comes down to the performance review. So if you have a performance review maybe once every 6 months or every 1 year, maybe, that's where you get together and you talk about what you have gained or what you have or how you have performed. But even then, the time is so
Yes.
short. Time is so short.
Yes.
You can't look through the entire year or through the entire 6 months in a 30-minute or maybe 45-minute one-on-one meeting. It's impossible, right?
Bingo.
So you need to have,
Bingo.
yeah. So you need to have much more frequent touch points. I would encourage Rob, since you're doing it much, it's kind of, you have take that leadership, you're coaching people, you're doing great job by doing so.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. But what are your recommendations? What is the frequency that you would recommend? At least once a month or sooner or later? What's the frequency you would recommend as a starting point?
Look, I always say this, that you shouldn't, again, informal conversation, you can have it on a regular basis. So how often are you actually talking to your people, right? Again, you
Right.
as a leader, you're in charge of people. Like, talk to your people on a regular basis. I'm out there communicating with my team on a daily basis. And it's not just for formal, did you get this job done? I will actually have a normal conversation to get to know them. But I think in terms
Right.
of like formal one-on-ones,
Yeah.
again, minimum 2 a year. And if you can do it quarterly, that's the
Yeah.
ideal, like that's the perfect spot. Because like you said, you wait an entire year to capture 12 months. It's very difficult to cram it into 30 minutes, right?
Yeah. It's
And
almost impossible.
another question I have for you. That's right. Another question I have for, how many times have you had those performance reviews canceled on you?
It happens, man. It happens because, again, it's scheduled. It's in your calendar. but then something else pops up which could be a much higher priority for
Yes.
the organization or for the leader, and then it's you didn't get even that chance, so somebody reviews it and you just get the feedback like automatically.
Yeah.
So I
And
agree with
and
you.
again,
At least,
when you
yeah, go ahead.
when you say that a higher priority comes up, the people are the highest priority.
Absolutely, I agree with
That's
that.
just my
With that, no, it's true, man. Like Rob, like, there's no one more important in an organization than the people.
yes.
And if that's not the vision of an organization, if that's not the mindset of an organization, then there's a big problem.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question, okay?
Yeah,
And I want you to give me an honest answer. So
sure.
I'm your, like, you have a leader, you have a performance appraisal coming up. You've worked very hard the entire year, and you're expecting some, positive feedback or whatever it is, praise, recognition. And you're a star player on the team. And when it comes to the end of the year, your appraisal gets canceled because your manager doesn't have time for you. How does that make you feel as a human being?
So I'm just thinking about it, but if it happens to me, frankly speaking, if it ever happens to me,
Mm-hmm.
that I was expecting, anticipating, as you described, an acknowledgement, an appraisal, a positive or whatever feedback, but I was expecting that meeting to happen. If it cancels on me, I would be demoralized. That's what I will use. I'll be demoralized, and I wouldn't,
Yes.
for a period of time, I wouldn't even, even think of going back to that environment. Like, even if I go there, I would feel like it's bothering me, right? I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So that's my honest answer. Yeah.
Okay. Here's 2 follow-up questions to that. What would it do to your engagement level? And how valued would you feel?
So, as I said, I wouldn't feel valued at all, because as I said earlier, if an organization or a leader is not valuing the people, because people is the valuable asset. So if I'm not being valued for whatever reason, then I don't feel valued at all. But the second thing is, in terms of engagement, I wouldn't even think of engaging in anything, because I feel like it's worthless at that point.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
So did I answer your question, or we wanted to have something
Absolutely.
deeper than that?
Absolutely. So your answer is a typical answer as a lot of people go through, right?
Right.
We are emotional beings. You feel devalued, demoralized when somebody doesn't give 2 craps about all the hard work that you've put in, because you've worked hard throughout the year, and all you expect is, there's one time a year that you expect to have that meeting with your manager. And a lot of people actually value that meeting with their managers because they feel good when they talk to a manager, right? It's very rare that you get to talk to your manager. You don't get to interact with your manager that frequently. And when that time comes, people feel really good about themselves. And then when you blow them off, they feel crappy. And, organizations wonder why their retention rate is so bad. People are leaving the company. People are disengaged. Production is not efficient, effective. All this is a byproduct of your leadership.
That's true. And 100%, right? And that's why most of the organizations are going through as you said, going through troubles with the retention rate, keeping the engagement, keeping the employees engaged, keeping them productive, keeping them or making them feel as valuable. So, you may hear this from some of the leaders that my team is not productive. They're not engaged. But at the same time, the question goes back to the leader: have you done your job? And if you haven't,
Yes.
then I don't expect from your team to do their job.
Yes. It's funny, it's easy to blame staff and your employees for not producing, not meeting your quota, but how are we keeping leaders accountable for theirs?
Really, really important point, Rob. And on that, I think what we're gonna do, we'll keep that. I think we need a separate session on how do we engage our staff?
Yes.
How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep our leadership engaged? We'll keep that for a separate session because I think we need a lot of, maybe at least 30 minutes or more, just to have a deep dive and uncover some of the pains behind it. But for now, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here tonight with me. And I hope that the audience and the listeners, the community is enjoying these conversations. I would expect feedback from our audience here. If you feel like there's anything you want us to address, if there's any problem that you feel like is bothering you in your daily routine, please reach out to myself and to Rob, and we would definitely try to address, and we would like to address those problems. And that's why we are bringing all these sessions live here, so that we can learn from each other. Rob, any parting
That's right.
comments?
No, I think you summed it up really well, and like you said, we're here to help out. We're here to answer some of those questions, and if even if you want to send it anonymously, you can do so, and we'll address it over here. So you can get some answers and takeaways and learn from it as we go on.
Awesome. Thank you again, and have a good night. Bye for now.